Welcome to another episode of Teen Minds Redefined, where we strive to redefine the relationships we have with our teens and to allow them to foster their own independence and authenticity. And we just coach them along, and they're the quarterbacks in the play, and we're just coaching them along. And so today we have a wonderful guest, Lorraine Connell. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Lorraine before we dive in. Lorraine is a seasoned educator with over 2 decades of experience, passionate about empowering teens to become confident leaders in their communities. As the owner of Peers Not Fears, LLC, Lorraine specializes in educational coaching and consultancy, crafting curricula focused on leadership and empathy. With a mission to amplify student voices often marginalized within the education system, Lorraine hosts the podcast Education Unimagined, love the name. Through insightful conversations, she sheds light on the challenges faced by students and advocates for more inclusive educational practices. Leveraging her expertise, Lorraine collaborates with schools, families, and communities to foster equitable access and empowerment for students. Her work delves into understanding and addressing biases to create stronger, more supportive environments for learning and growth. And when she's not engaged in educational advocacy, Lorraine is a devoted mother to 2 boys, actively supporting them in their endeavors. Together with her husband, Justin, also an educator, she champions social and emotional learning to nurture well-rounded individuals ready to tackle the complexities of the world. I love that story already. Welcome, Lorraine Connell.
Thanks, Cheryl. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be fun, and I think we have a lot of parallels as I read your bio and look at your podcast and listen. I think we have a lot of things in common. But let's start with, there's no way you woke up when you were 16 and said, oh, I'm going to have this podcast and this coaching and this. It never happens with coaching. So can you tell us a little bit of how you got to here, what your big why was to get to where you are today?
Absolutely. I think the why is such a powerful thing to share. And so, like you, I was a teacher. I taught for 20 years, and 10 years in, I was looking at the ladder of education, and there was one rung, right? Administrator. And that didn't really fit me. So I'm 10 years into my teaching career. I'm still pretty young. I love what I'm doing. 15 years in, now I'm like, can I really do this for the next 20 years, 30 years to retirement? And I didn't have an answer for that. I did start engaging with student leaders at the school that I was teaching at. And I fell in love. And I saw the parallels of working with student leaders and what I was doing in my chemistry classroom. And it was strange because how do the two connect? And hopefully I will get there and share how they connect. But when we pair kids up in the classroom, one student knows more than the other, it makes a natural connection. They're helping each other. But we don't ever really tell the student who doesn't have the content knowledge that they're helping the other student. We kind of miss that discussion with them. So they're always feeling less than, they're always feeling like, oh, I'm a drag. But in reality, they bring to the partnership just as much as the person who knows about the content, because they have to communicate with the partner who knows more that their effective leadership or their effective communication is not working, and can you teach me in a different way? And if I could go back in my teaching career, I wish I could go back and tell all of those students that just because you didn't have the content knowledge didn't mean you weren't bringing anything to the partnership. But when I was working with these student leaders, I realized that when we give students a title like student leader, peer leader, student president, whatever title we give them, we put them on this pedestal and we treat them a little bit differently. You know, if they're in the hallway or they come to class late, we sort of look the other way because they're student leaders. They must have been doing something great. But if they do something really on another level where they make a mistake, like they get caught drinking or they get caught with an illegal substance or they're, cheating or something like that, we remove the pedestal and we don't really help them figure out a way to reclaim that opportunity and learn from their mistake, because we want to make an example out of them so that other students don't make that same mistake, which is a great message for all of the other kids. But the message that one individual student gets is it's not okay to make mistakes. If I make a mistake, I must do something to hide it so that no one knows I made that mistake, because so much is on the line. And it sends a message to all of the other kids. Yes, don't make that mistake. But really, the message we're sending is that in order to be a leader, you have to be perfect. So you can't make mistakes. And I had all of these students who I saw as leaders not stepping into the role of leadership because they knew they made mistakes. And so when I asked them, why aren't you coming into this program? They said, well, I'm not a leader because I make mistakes. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. And I had an opportunity where I had a conversation with a student who had made a mistake, and the impact that it had on them in years to come was something that I didn't want to be perpetuated in other students. So that's my why. My why is that I want every kid to know that you are a leader, and leadership is something that is a skill that you develop. You are not born with leadership skills. It's just like any other skill you develop. You practice, you try, you make mistakes, and you learn.
And I love that, because when our kids make a mistake, I think even when we make mistakes, we don't need to be reminded of what the mistake is. We're fully aware that we've screwed up.
Yeah.
So notice it. How do we move forward? How do we learn from there? And I think that's amazing, because it builds that vulnerability right into being a leader. And as we teach, we learn. And as we learn, we're able, like, it's just such a cycle. So I think from a student's perspective, what does a student define as leadership in your eyes?
Well, that's one of the challenges that we face, is that if I asked a room full of 100 people what their definition of leadership was, I would get similar answers, but every answer would be different enough that I would get 100 different versions of that answer. And so when I am thinking about leadership, especially as a teen, and I know that my definition, because I've seen it come to pass, my definition is a little bit different than this person, and my definition is definitely different than my teachers and my administrators and my parents, then I don't actually really know what it means to be a leader. And so the two issues that I have found is, one, our definitions of leadership is very, very different, and the requirements that we believe that we need to have in order to be a leader is also really different. So it's hard for anyone to have the courage to step into leadership, to take the risk of putting ourselves out there as a quote unquote leader, because my requirements are different than your requirements. And so that's why I sort of like I take that question and I step it back, and I want to make sure that everyone knows that there is only one requirement to being a leader. And that requirement is that you can make a decision. And we make decisions all the time, every day, with knowing and not knowing that we're making those decisions. And if you know that that's the only requirement, then everything else that you have defined as being a requirement, you can now address as a quality, a skill, something that you can develop. Because if I don't right now have the communication skills to stand up in front of my peers and speak out, and I think that's the requirement, I might think I can never be a leader.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because it's not, I think one of the myths that we can kind of debunk is that a leader does not mean you have the answers. A leader can also say, I don't know. And as a parent, as a leader, as a teacher, as a leader, as an administrator, as a leader, which I never see, can say, I don't know. Let's figure it out. And that can be such a bonus for people who are thinking, oh, well, I don't know all the science curriculum. I don't know all the math. I can't be a leader in this classroom. I don't know. But I don't know is part of it.
It is. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that you use the word myths, because there are 3 myths that I believe that we operate under in believing what a leader is. If we go back to that, my why is that we believe leaders are perfect, because the leaders that we see hide their mistake. They blame other people for their mistakes. And we all know they are the ones that made the mistake, and they're telling us that they didn't. So if they don't think they are making a mistake, then maybe I can't make mistakes. And so there's that first myth. The second myth is that leaders have a title, right? And so in order for me to be a leader, and this happened to me, and this is again part of the why, I was a teacher. I am and was a parent. I was a coach on a sports team. I was an advisor to a club, but I wasn't a leader because I didn't have a leadership title. And just believing that myth kept me small. It kept me from making decisions that I knew I could make, well, because I wasn't a leader, right? So if I don't think I'm a leader, I can't make these decisions. I have to wait for a leader to make those decisions, then we're held back. And the third one goes to developing our skills, right? Leaders are born with those skills. They're a natural leader. Sure. Just like natural basketball athletes are, some of them are natural athletes. But other kids, many other basketball players have worked really hard to develop those skills.
Yeah. I want to ask about what characteristics can we see in our kids at home or kids and I'm 99% high school.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about, teenagers. But when we talk about kids in our classrooms or kids in our home, what can we recognize and notice that characteristics that they have that we can celebrate and say, oh, that's it. Let's foster that. Because, there's that, I really want my kids to stand up for themselves and I want them to, but at home, sometimes we think, I don't really want you to stand up for yourself. I just want you to clean your flipping room. So, but I think sometimes even in the classroom, there's that, oh, she's so bossy and she's telling everybody what to do. And he thinks he can pick the teams. And so how do we separate these and find these characteristics and say, that's it. That's what we're going to foster. That's what we need to celebrate. What characteristics are we looking for?
Well, it's not that we're not looking for them. We just don't know when we see them, right? So we often will define a shy student or a student who is shy as not being a leader because they don't have a voice, they don't stand up, they don't speak out. But in reality, that student is one of our best observers. They're the best listeners. And who doesn't love to talk, right? And to be able to share our ideas with a listener, and then to reflect on what that listener might say to us. I also think that we deem troublemakers not as leaders, but in reality, those troublemakers are probably our strongest leaders. They're just not leading in the direction that we want them to be leading. And so if we harness them into believing in what they're doing is really good, we maybe can empower them to see the opportunities that they have to lead in a different direction, right? They're really looking for that attention. They're looking for somebody to say, I see you. And if we see them, maybe they harness that leadership in a way that is for good rather than bad.
Mm-hmm. That's such a good point. That's such a good point. So as a parent, how can we foster this at home?
Yeah. I think that one of the greatest lessons I learned as a parent in helping my teens and young children develop their leadership was to engage in a way that let them make decisions, right? And not to automatically classify a decision as good or bad, right or wrong, right? And so often we'll say to our kids, did you learn something from that? But are we really helping them process what they learned? Was that decision the right decision for you? Right. And I use this example a lot because everybody can relate to it. Right. So we all get up in the morning or we don't. There's their first decision. Right.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I might choose not to get up. And many adults in my life will say that was the wrong decision. That was a bad decision. But I don't truly know if that was a right or wrong decision for that individual. The only person that knows is that individual. So instead of saying to my teenager who slept through his alarm, that was dumb, that was a bad mistake. What did taking a step back and saying, why do you think that happened? Do you think that was the right decision for you at the time? And listening, maybe that kid stayed up really late the night before studying. And if he had gone to school without that rest, he might have gotten in trouble, right? I don't know what the choice was made, but if I take that power away from him in thinking about how it affected him, then he doesn't get a chance to learn. Did that decision really outweigh the cost that I was avoiding?
That's true, because then we would launch in as parents saying that wasn't a good decision because now I'm late for work and you don't have a lunch and you're going to miss your class and it's everything. It was a bad decision for
Me,
us. Thank
right?
you. Yeah, that's a great way to reframe it. I like that because it puts it back on them. And yes, even if they, teenagers, yeah, of course it was, but it still makes them think about it. Just because responses come out of their mouth doesn't mean we're actually making impact on what they're thinking about.
100%.
And it could be conversations that we even have at home out loud saying, "Oh, I got a speeding ticket today, and that probably wasn't a very good decision for me," because I find that our kids are always watching and they're always listening. And we can enforce all of these things, but if we're not doing it and they're not seeing the good effects of whatever it is we're doing, then it's irrelevant, really. So let's flip this around now to school. So let's talk about what teachers should be looking for and what language they should be using to foster this, as opposed to, oh, I just want to get them out of the classroom for 5 minutes to go do the attendance but we'll call them a leader. No, that's not what we're doing. So what language can we be using in the classroom?
It's a great question. I want to talk about group work because I think group work is the bane of every teacher, right? Like we want it to be so powerful, and yet we see time after time certain kids taking on that role of doing it all and the rest of the kids slacking off. And I think one of the challenges is that we don't teach delegation. I didn't teach delegation.
Yes.
I assigned roles, I told them what they were doing, and then off they went. But if I am acknowledging that what I am doing is delegating ownership and leadership to students, then maybe they're going to see something else. And the other thing that I think that hinders group work is the grade. And I know I've been in both roles, right? I've been in the group leader role where I clearly did not believe that the students in my group could do the work to my level. And so I automatically disregarded any strengths that they might have. And I just took on that role and I led the pack. And then at the end, when I was so burnt out and frustrated that nobody had helped me, I forgot that I didn't engage them in the conversation and assumed they couldn't do it. That was a challenge that I created by not working through together, like, where are our strengths? Where are our defaults? How can we support each other? And I've also been the kid in the group who didn't bring the strength that the leader thought I needed. And then they perceived that I couldn't do anything. And I was viewed as the slacker. I would never define myself as a slacker. But the perception is that I didn't contribute. But that was because the leader didn't ask me. And so I think we have this view that leadership is a top-down approach, when in reality, leadership is an even field where we all step in to that role and do it, right? So when I'm a teacher and I'm saying, okay, somebody become the spokesperson, somebody become the leader, who's the group leader, it makes it really hard for the rest of the group to know how to step into opportunities of leadership in that group.
And then there's the social dynamics.
Absolutely.
Right? And which of course comes with grade, but but she's my best friend and he's my best friend and I don't like, all of that stuff comes in. But I like that you said that's a mic drop for me, that we don't teach delegation. That's like, and how would we teach that? Like, what kind of curriculum could we put in to say, okay, this is a lesson plan on delegation? What would we start with as a teacher?
I would stop being the one in charge, right? I would say, we need to discuss the following topic, or we need to learn the following things. What are we going to do? How are we going to do that? And just the hardest thing as a teacher is not providing the answers.
Yes. It's funny, as you're talking, can we then say to kids, okay, here's a pink Post-it note, here's a red Post-it note, and here's a green Post-it note, and then list on the board, these are all the contributors we need. And some might just be research, and some might just be drawing something. And it doesn't put and I know that the anxiety that came from kids who were in groups and then they all had to present, and it completely immobilized them for the whole project, because they knew at the end they have to stand up in front of their peers, and not everybody does that. Not everybody enjoys that. And I just love that idea of let's step back and teach delegation first before we do anything, because then everyone with a different colored Post-it note or whatever can contribute to that group. So we have everyone of every color in this group. And then the expectation, I'm the red, I'm the researcher, so I'm not standing up. Great, I get to do my, I love that. I love that. That's so cool.
I'm glad you love that. I do too.
Yeah.
And I think there are so many missed opportunities. Like I said, that group or that pairing of one kid who was stronger and weaker, in the content. I missed that opportunity to talk to those students about how they are both leaders in that space.
Yeah, I wish I knew this when I was still trying to work with teachers on. So I spent 25 years in special education, so working with our differently needed kids. And I would say, you're creating this anxiety because this kid just is nonverbal or can't, but loves to do this. Oh, but that's not part of the curriculum. Actually it is. We're just differentiating it to make it inclusive. But it's, you get this linear, I'm following the curriculum thing. And I think it's funny. I think we both have that. My only ladder rail was admin as well. And I thought, I can't. And in advocating for a lot of these issues with kids, I was told multiple times by admin that I'd made all my career limiting moves. But because you're advocating, and when you're doing that, it's the passion, and you want it. Like I've said to multiple administrators, you want me to do this. This is where it lies. There's no black and white. It's all gray, and you want the passion. You want us to stand up, because now we're teaching them to stand up for themselves. We're teaching parents to stand up for themselves. Okay, I don't want to go off topic. I want to ask you now, because that will go. I warned you. So, how can schools create communities of leadership? Like, how can we create leadership roles for kids to take on? Like, how can we actually create them instead of them having their own perception of what a leadership is? So I'm not going to step up there. How do we create those roles so then a kid can see themselves in that role?
Yeah, I think that's the trick, right? I think really it's about redefining what leadership is and saying, when you are making decisions that impact you, you're practicing leadership skills. And once you know that you're practicing leadership skills and that it's not a binary of good and bad or perfect and imperfect, there's a growth process, then all of a sudden everybody can take a bite out of leadership. And I also think having conversations about strengths and weaknesses and pairing them together allows everybody to see that just because I'm strong here doesn't mean I'm strong everywhere. And that fear that somebody might see me weak is really a challenge in the teenager years. So removing the need to be a leader that leads everybody and just empowering kids to lead themselves and having those conversations about, what are your goals and what are the things that are going to get you to that goal? And in a perfect world, we would take the titles away, but we don't live in a perfect world. And right now, that's how our world operates. So in my classroom, I want to celebrate when somebody makes a decision that is out of the norm for them. I want to acknowledge mistakes. I don't want to penalize mistakes. And I think that's it's so foreign in education. Everything is a penalty when you make a mistake, right? I think of the tests that I grade, the homework that I assign. When you make a mistake, there's an X there. There's not an opportunity to say, hey, what'd you get for that answer? What'd you get for this answer? Oh, we got the same answer. Do you think we did it right? Or you got a different answer than me? Let's see why our answers don't match. And, take the onus away from me as the teacher from marking things right or wrong.
I love that. And I love, I've talked to a few educators who I love when they say, this isn't the answer I was looking for. Why did you give me this response? And more times than not, it makes sense. And you can say, oh, wow, you're really thinking outside the box. That's great. You're not coloring in the lines. That's great. Like, celebrate it. And I love that. I love that's like that. Okay, not quite what I was looking for, but as opposed to wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So tell us about the work that you're doing. Tell us about your coaching. Tell us about your podcast. Like, I want to know, I've been listening to it and reading up on it and I love it, but I want to hear from you. Like, what's your goal and what are you doing? And I know you have all these different avenues. So talk to us about that.
Well, I want to start with my podcast because this is sort of where it all started. We were all in COVID, right? I, as a parent, was struggling. I, as a teacher, was struggling. My students were struggling. My children were struggling. And I just started asking the young people in my life, what is working? And that led me down this path of conversations that I never, ever would have had with kids had I not asked that. And once I started having those conversations, I was like, everybody needs to hear this. I can't be the only one that hears these ideas because, quite honestly, their ideas were so easy to implement. I didn't need money. I didn't need more time. I didn't need more resources. I just needed to stop thinking I knew what was right and ask. And so that's how the podcast started. And the more I listened, the more I saw how powerful their voice was. And I saw how often their voice was silenced. We ask kids to give their opinion and then we don't take it. And I know we can't always take their opinions, but when we ask for it and then we don't take it without any conversation, it really has an impact on a student.
Yes.
And so that combined with what I was learning when I was working with that student leadership group of the mistakes and the perfection, that there was this belief, I just knew there had to be a different way. And that circles back to what I was doing in my chemistry classroom, right? So that partnering, train the trainer. I deliver content. I'm going to give you some tools. Now you take what you've learned and teach it to someone else, share it with someone else. And when I realized that there was an opportunity to do that with leadership, the doors just opened up for me. And so when I first started, I would ask schools, pick your students, like pick diverse kids from this group and this group and this group. But we still have this bias. There's where your bias comes in. We still have this bias of who the leaders are. And they would pick that group of students that is already doing everything and giving them the opportunity to work with me, which was great because they were great students. They were hard workers, but they didn't have enough time.
Mm-hmm.
We were already doing too many things. So that goes back to the like not teaching to delegate. Then I got wise and I said, give me all of your first year students or put me in the bane of every student's or school's existence, the study hall. Put me in the study hall. I got such a diverse group of students when I worked in that sense. And then I would teach them all these skills. They would play games with me. And when you play games, you inherently make mistakes. And they would see these high flying students who always got hundreds. They saw them making mistakes. And the kids who were getting these A's would see these troublemakers organizing the group and learning and teaching. And it was all of a sudden they became on this playing field that was equal. And so once I'm done with that first cohort of the study hall or their first years, then I invite that group. I also learned this mistake. First, I invited a certain group of students to join me in the next level. But that meant that, again, my biases were coming into play. So now I invite anyone from that first group to join me in the second level. And then I ask those students to take what they've learned and share it with other people that they're connected to. So if it's in my online community, I'm going to ask those students to find a group that they're part of. If I'm in a school and I've been working with a study hall, I'm going to ask those kids that were in the study hall to go to their homeroom, go to their advisory, and practice what they've learned with me. Come back. Let's talk about what you've learned. Let's talk about the lessons. What did you do? How did it work? And then eventually we've got this system where the new trainers are training a new group of students, and I'm working my way out of the system and they're working their way in. So that's my favorite part, is that like, I don't have to be there forever. And if I am doing my job right, then I won't be there forever. It is my ultimate belief that kids have the ability to do the things that we are doing for them.
Oh, I love that. And it's when you say, like, I really appreciate that you are telling us, oh, that was my bias. This was my mistake, because this is where everybody learns. Like, yes, I didn't know. And yes, I screwed up, but here's where I moved forward, or here's what I learned. And I think that's so important. And it's not something your program sounds a little nothing like the PD that we sit through in school, where we're yapped at for, I don't know, 3 hours, and then you need a survey, and then you go on. And then this was a big problem for me, even in the leadership roles of admin, is, and I don't know if it's the same, but in Ontario, we have facilitators and we have the leaders and the board, and they come in with their own portfolio and their own buzzwords and their own initiative that is from the top down. And it never comes with the proper education or support or money or staffing. It never comes with that. And then just at the end of their road, in comes another one. And we spend more money on the new initiative and the new buzzwords and the new PD. And all this money just stays in the ethers. It doesn't get filtered down, right? We're spending it on all the buzzwords, and it would just make me crazy. And I think any administrator listening to this, wake up, wake up. And I love that you know, and how many administrators do I know that have said, oh man, I should not have said that. I should not have done that. Nope. And so this is where, you know, you are debunking all of that. And I love it. And I love that you're going into the schools to do it. I think that's just really cool, and implement and then step back. And how else do they learn? It's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah. And my dream is that I'm not the one going into the school. I'm hosting this online program for teens everywhere because it's not feasible for me to get from New England, United States to Ontario to work with your students. How am I going to get this message to them? Well, kids in that district are going to come to my online program. They're going to learn with me. And then if they feel like they can take leadership level number 2, they're going to take what they've learned with me and they're going to try and implement it somewhere in the students. And then I have a greater impact than just working with one individual school community. So that's my ultimate dream, is that's what I'm doing.
That's so cool. And I love that, COVID was horrible, obviously, and the terrible things that came out of it. But I would never in a million years have thought that I could retire early from teaching to have a podcast to broadcast exactly this. And when I first started the podcast, and this was only in October, it was essentially designed for parents who have kids who were neurodivergent, because that's my excellence, is special ed and how to advocate in the schools and how to, look for resources and all of this. And then as I started interviewing people, it just became this broader, more evolved. I was even trying to explain it to somebody yesterday when they said, "Oh, I thought you wanted to do one-to-one consulting." And I'm like, but then COVID happened.
Yeah.
And there's this whole world out there. And I can help thousands instead of a couple. And I can talk to people like Lorraine, and I can learn more. And then we can share that story. And if COVID taught us anything, like all the years we were saying to kids, get off the screen. And then we're saying, get on your Google Meet. Your teacher's coming in and don't move for 8 hours. It's so like diabolical, some of the stuff that I think that we said. And then we turned right around because society said, this is what we're doing now. And, but also learned that kids found some skills in the online world. And, now it's not just this linear path where you're going to high school and then you're going to post-secondary and then you're going to get this job. Like there's so many other opportunities now that kids are celebrating that is very inclusive, that they don't have to follow that path. And so they become their own leaders. And I think that's just the coolest thing. This has been amazing and eye-opening as always. I love hearing new information and said in different ways. And I love, again, that you speak to mistakes that we make in the classroom. And then, but how do we grow from it? Not how do we cover it up, and how our kids are at home are watching this, and our kids in the classroom are watching this and learning from us, and they love it. So Lorraine, tell us how to find you, how to work with you. Tell us all about you. I'm going to put everything in the show notes, but I just want you to say it out loud.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I want your listeners to leave with, the greatest opportunity you can to connect with a teenager, is to own your mistakes as a parent, as a teacher, as an adult, in any way, shape, or form. And that is scary for us. But man, there's no regret after you own that mistake. No regrets. So you can find me. My first advice is to go to my parent Facebook group, which is free. It's called Leadership for Our Kids. I often add things there to help people think about, oh, I didn't think about it that way. I wonder if I had this conversation with my kid. And my website and all of my social media is Peers, Not Fears. For my website, there's dashes in between each word. And my podcast is Education Unimagined. And if you know of a student who has a story to tell about their educational experience and where they develop leadership, I would love for you to connect them to me.
Fantastic. Oh, I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. This has been such a joy. Thank you for the work that you do, and keep sharing and keep talking. I just love it. We need more leaders in this world, and we need more people like you developing them. So I love that program. Thank you so much, Lorraine. And thank you for listening to Teen Minds Redefined. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time.